Hey everybody, it's Matt Freer from Avid here at Sundance 2020 once again, this time joined by my friends from the film 9 Days. How do I know it's called 9 Days? Because they get an awesome hat that goes with it. It's editor Michael Taylor and associate editor Zack Boger. And Michael, I've heard a lot about this film, yet I still don't quite understand it. Could you give us a little summation of what 9 Days is all about?
Yes, the movie opens with about a 10-minute, I would call it a silent sequence, although there is sound and music, but it's a solitary man who seems to be alone in a house going through daily chores, and it's extremely mysterious. You have no idea what he's doing. And then you only see another character. I won't call him a human being exactly, but another character 10 minutes in. And then it starts to become sort of a normal film, but not really. You learn one of the defining features of this house that the individual lives in, his name is Will, is that he has 30 old-fashioned cathode ray, square TVs mounted on a wall. And on those TVs are 30 point-of-view live shots of human beings going about their daily routines on planet Earth. 30 live playback, 15 screens at one time. That's what Zack did. He created a lot of that with us. And then we composited more as we had to. We had a brilliant visual effects producer named George Lucas. It's not spelled the way of the other George Lucas, but he's equally talented, maybe more. And you learn that the job of this man is to choose souls who desire to be born. And he has a candidacy, and we have a series of people who look like human beings come into the house, played by Zazie Beetz and Bill Skarsgård, Tony Hale, and so forth, who are basically auditioning for the job of being born. And if they're lucky enough, they're going to end up on one of those television screens.
So tell me, based on that description alone, that you don't want to see this movie. I'm dying to see this movie. Zack, for such a normal/abnormal movie, is there a normal/abnormal workflow that you had to employ?
There's nothing normal about this movie. This is a very difficult movie and very complex movie because, as Michael was saying, there's 30 TV screens. So at any point, that's basically you're making 30 different movies that are playing in the background. And sometimes you're paying attention to them, sometimes you see them on camera, and other times they're just in the background. But you're basically making like 31 movies in order to make this. So it's very complex.
So Michael, how did you find this project?
I went to a test screening of a film called The Evening Hour in New York by my friend Braden King, who's here this year with The Evening Hour. And my friend Joe Krings cut that. I think you've talked to Joe. And I went to the test screening. I ran to my friend Lucas Joaquin, who's a great producer. He produced many wonderful New York films, including Love is Strange, which I did for Lucas and for Ira Sachs a few years ago, which was here. And I was really honest with Lucas. I just come back from L.A., and I said, I don't know what's really going on. Everyone's talking about The Farewell. We had a great launch. It's coming out, and I can't seem to find the right project. And I need that summer project so I can be back at Sundance again. And maybe I didn't say that exactly, but I said, what's good? Where's a good film? And he said, well. And it wasn't like he even had any inside dirt. He said, well, I read about this film on Deadline. Deadline, 9 Days. He read the press release. He said, you should get in touch with them. I called my agent. A couple days later, I got a text from Jason Berman, who's one of the producers, along with several other producers. And it was a Sunday. Jason often sends you texts on Sundays or Saturdays or just about any day of the week. And he said, I hear you're interested in 9 Days. Can I set you up with Ed Zanoda, our director? He's in Utah, so it'll be a Skype interview, which I did. And it's actually interesting. When I interviewed with Lulu Wang for The Farewell, she was in China. So I very often think it's a mistake to try to meet an editor, a director or a producer, for that matter, through Skype. If necessary, I try to fly myself in so I can actually meet them face-to-face. But my last few major jobs have all come through Skype. I guess Avid doesn't have any ownership of Skype, does it?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I think they're probably owned by IMDb, which is owned by Amazon or something like that. But it is a great Skype. I can advocate for Skype. And then a few days later, usually I hear from my agent like, oh, they liked you, they didn't like you, or whatever. But instead, I just get another text from Jason Berman and says, congratulations, we'll see you in Utah. So the producers decided to fly me to Utah so I could work on a daily basis with Edson for about 3 weeks before principal photography started on these stories, television point of view shots. They're all point of view shots, so they had to be relatively seamless. Sometimes we'd have blinks or things like that, but and we'd shot a lot of them in Utah, but we also had a second team in Brazil shooting stories and a third team in LA. So all this footage was being sent in, and Zack's predecessor was organizing all of that for me. We were cutting them, or I was sending them to Edson for approval. He couldn't approve of these stories. He couldn't lock them. And they had to be locked because they were playing live without me being in Utah. So I ended up spending the whole summer in Utah up until mid-September. I think like July to September. And then by the time we started shooting, what I was thinking, before we started shooting, I was sitting in a room with Edson for a few hours each evening because he'd been out scouting or rehearsing with actors or working on the screenplay. He'd work with me locking these stories, and then he'd spin around to Wyatt Garfield, who was our DP, and be doing storyboards and shot lists. So he's like prepping for a film while locking. He's editing. It's common, not that uncommon these days for a director to check in on the edit and on the assembly even while you're shooting. In fact, I love being on location when I can. I love being close to the team and to the director. But in this case, we're actually editing material that's going to be embodied into the film before we've even started shooting the film. And then there was another aspect to it which Zack was heavily involved with, where where we have these sort of, they're almost like dream sequences, I'll call them now, which involve panels which have multiple projectors on them. So it's not just televisions. Now we have multiple panels. They're up in the air and on both sides and in the back. They're showing backgrounds, and they have to be in sync. And it was my job to get this footage from Brazil. It was mostly from Brazil and other places, and try to figure out how the panels could work. But then it was Zack's job to make them actually work. And I had a call to you about, we'd been told again by our producer, well, financial reasons, we can afford for you to come, but we won't be able to have Zack there. You'll have to work with him long distance. And we were having trouble getting the panels going. And this was a frequent thing that happened on the film. Jason Berman said, well, Michael, just tell me what we need to make these work. And I said, Zack Boger in Salt Lake City. And he said, okay. So Zack arrived, and we're shooting the panels the next day. And what happened to you then?
Well, I arrived in Utah and was told, we're shooting these panels the next day. We've never done this before. We don't know how to do it. And I have a string out, but that's all we got. So figured this out.
Well, you wanted to be in the movie business, Zack.
Yeah, thriving under pressure, I'll call it. Yeah, but the entire movie was sort of like we're figuring things out as we're going, and we're really like flying by the seat of our pants. But because everyone was so talented and so hardworking, we really were able to pull it off. And there were so many cases where things almost didn't work, and against all odds, we made them work.
There were so many situations where we, like those point of view stories that played on the televisions, we had, for technical reasons, we had to shoot them at 29:9:8. Then we converted them to 24 frames to play on the TVs, 24 frame playback. Sometimes we were doing the opposite. We were giving Zack 24 or 23:9:8 or 9:7, whatever it is, and saying now it has to go to 30, and because that's what the projectors were wired for. And our director is the most wonderful human being, Edson Odra, and I think we both felt the whole time we cannot let Edson down. And I remember Jason Berman was, I think, turning 37, and he was having this big party up at the, not even at the Sundance Resort, high above it. And the invitation was you had to come here to take like 2 hours worth of chairlifts to get up to the top of the mountain.
You guys do anything easy?
No, and the thing is, and plus we're doing the plates, the panels the next day. Yeah. So Edson heroically said, I'm going to stay behind. I'm going to skip the party. And Zack stayed behind. There was only two of us who did not enjoy the lovely party on the top of the mountain. But you got it done. And like at midnight, I think you said, we finally finished it. We're ready to go tomorrow. And we did. And it worked seamlessly. It was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly sounds like you guys held up your end of the bargain with Edson, and I hear it's an amazing film. The description that you guys gave is pretty surreal. That's Zack and Michael. Their film is 9 Days. It's playing here at Sundance. That's just one of the many stories you're going to hear from Avid here at Sundance 2020.